Good morning. Welcome to Faith for Living. This morning we're happy to be here at the beautiful Steel Memorial Bandstand where the sun is out and the breeze is soft and the lake is beautiful behind us. And we're happy to see those of you here who are here with our live audience. And also I want to welcome those who are watching us via our 3 different platforms. We're very happy to have Dr. Jack Harnish with us this week, coming to us from Platte Lake in northern Michigan. Before his retirement, Jack served as the senior pastor of First United Methodist Church in Birmingham, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit, and before that in Ann Arbor. And for 7 years, he was the Associate General Secretary for the Board of Higher Education and Ministry for the United Methodist Church, and in that important role supervised the process of ministry for candidates, but also helped to establish a United Methodist seminary in Russia and a seminary in Estonia. And then he was on the board of the seminary in Estonia for 12 years. And so he has had a significant impact upon the life of our church and upon its future. Dr. Harnish is a graduate of Asbury College and Asbury Theological Seminary, received his doctorate from Garrett Evangelical Seminary. He writes a weekly blog called Monday Memo. His most recent book is Do Not Be Afraid, and it is available at the Fine Print Bookstore here in Lakeside. His presentations this week are on the minor prophets. We learned about Hosea yesterday, and we're anxious to learn about another prophet this morning. We will be here each morning, Monday through Thursday, and then these presentations will be recorded for broadcast later on in the day, and they will be archived so you can really watch them anytime or send them on to relatives and friends. Jack is here with his wife, Judy, this week. They have 2 sons, 2 adult sons, and 3 grandchildren, and we're so happy to have them here this week. I want to remind you that this afternoon's Religious Life Seminar is at the train station patio from 3 to 4:30 p.m., and we will be using the book as the basis for our study, Divided by Faith, Evangelical Religion, and the Problem of Race in America. These are also available at the Fine Print Bookstore. It's not necessary that you read the book before you come, but it would be helpful to have a copy. And this seminar will be led by Reverend Dr. Greg Linville, who's here with us this morning, and guests Emily and Dan Camwisa, and Marcus and Chelsea McFoling, and they will be helping us with the discussion today. Remind you that tomorrow evening here at the bandstand is Vespers at 7 o'clock with Dr. Harnish, and on Thursday, Vespers at 7 o'clock with Reverend Karen Graham, and her series on the fruits of the Spirit with Holy Communion. And also that this is the last week for our picnic in Perry Park, which is held on 5:30 on Wednesday evenings. And let me say, as a preview of things to come, that the Lakeside United Methodist Church has decided to hold their Sunday services this fall until, as long as weather permits, here at the bandstand. And so following the season, there will be worship here each and every week. And I thought you would want to know about that because some are staying on beyond the season, especially this year. As we begin our time together, let us have a word of prayer. Dear God, we give you thanks for this beautiful day. We thank you for the opportunity to spend time in reflection and study and in thought. We thank you for the one who has come to share with us. We pray your blessing upon him and his ministry, not only with us at Lakeside this week, but his ongoing ministry and his ongoing influence throughout the world. We ask, Lord, that you would bless Jack and keep him in your care, and you would bless all of us and open our minds and hearts to what you have for us today. All this we pray in the name of Christ our Lord. Amen. Would you with me welcome once again Dr. Jack Harnish.
Thanks, Charlie. Here, you can take that with you, too. Well, good morning. What a beautiful morning at Lakeside and on the Great Lakes for all of us who love the Great Lakes. It's a wonderful morning and it's a beautiful day. And thank you for your warm welcome as we come from that state up north and even worse from Ann Arbor. We thank you for your warm welcome and for the opportunity to be here. Let me say just a couple words of so what do they say, shameless self-promotion. The book that is in the bookstore It's actually written a couple years ago. It's a collection of writings by bishops and by young clergy, intentionally collecting a variety of bishops of the United Methodist Church and young clergy sharing words of hope. It was actually written before what we now know as the protocol, which will probably divide our great denomination. But I think it still has a word to offer in terms of all of the negativity to identify those places of positive, hopeful life, signs of vitality within the United Methodist movement. I'm working on another book on East Handley Jones, and like one of my friends, I mentioned East Handley Jones, and she said, "Oh, my mother loved East Handley Jones." And there are a lot of people that feel that way. He wrote 28 books. He traveled the world throughout his ministry, spent most of his time in India, also the United States. He died in 1973, but it is amazing how this man's writings can speak so effectively to our century and to our time. He was a close friend of Mahatma Gandhi. His book entitled Gandhi, A Personal Portrait, I think is probably one of the most important books he wrote, and particularly for a time when we are trying to figure out how to live in a multicultural, multi-religious world. It's a powerful book. Another one of his books that I would mention this morning, because we're talking about Amos, and the words of Amos have particular ring for our nation, a reprint of East Handley Jones' book entitled The Christ of the American Road. It was written back in the 40s, but it's been edited by his granddaughter and republished. The subtitle is A Manifestation for the Reconsecration of America. And once again, it's amazing how the writings of this man from the 40s and 50s could have such resonance in our nation today. So that's a recent republication of East Handley Jones' book, The Christ of the American Road, a manifesto for the reconsecration of America, and I recommend it to your reading. Just to say a word about these messages, I am a preacher by trade, not a theologian of sorts or a seminary professor, so probably anything I do will end up sounding like a sermon. I try to get past some of the gory details of these prophecies, sometimes quite negative, and to say, what is the big issue? What is the big idea that can speak to us even in our time and that can bring us a word of hope? My assumption is that the Old Testament prophets, major and minor, were not predicting the future. Rather, they were applying God's word to their everyday circumstances and to the world in which they lived. And yet, because I happen to believe that the Bible is inspired, those ancient messages can still have resonance for us today. The Bible is pretty hard on fortune telling, future telling, astrology, soothsaying, prognostication. So the prophets are not so much about trying to foretell the future, but they tell forth God's word. And there's a big difference. The job of the prophets is not to predict the end times. The job is to relate God's word to the real events of their world, to interpret what was happening in their nation in the light of God's vision. They pronounce God's judgment as a way of saying, this is where we're headed and here is the result. But here is God's vision for the world. And here is what God would intend in God's good future. So they hold beside each other these two sometimes contrasting images of God's judgment on the nation and God's vision of hope. That's in great contrast to how the word prophecy is often used in our day. Just an example, on our way driving down the other day, just outside Cadillac, Michigan, there's a huge billboard that says, "End time prophecy fulfilled today." Now, when I saw that, do you remember there was a Peanuts cartoon where the Peanuts kids were at summer camp? And at summer camp, they heard the preaching about Jesus is coming again tomorrow. Jesus is coming again. Be ready. And then Charlie Brown goes into the center of the camp. And here's a large poster of their 5-year plan. And Charlie Brown walks away and says, "You know, Jesus might be coming tomorrow, but I wasn't born yesterday." The prophets in the Bible do not predict the future, they announce outcomes. They proclaim God's judgment on sin and disobedience, then they hold up the vision of God's future and the hope of God's deliverance. The prophets speak truth, truth to power, truth to the nation, even when it is uncomfortable. They never hesitate to speak directly to the issues of their time and their day and tell forth God's judgment and God's vision. That's the primary characteristic of these minor prophets. Their preaching and proclamation is specifically related to the events of their day. And yet, they can speak to us very clearly in our day. Now, when I was a pastor, more than once I heard people say, "I don't want to hear politics from the pulpit." It took me a while, but after a while I finally figured out that what they meant was, "I don't want to hear your politics from the pulpit." And quite frankly, neither do I. The pulpit is not the place for partisan politics. But unfortunately, what I believe to be ethical, moral, spiritual issues, other people sometimes interpret it as purely political issues. For example, the pollution of our Great Lakes. It's not just a political issue or an economic issue or an environmental issue. It's a spiritual issue about our relationship with our Creator God and our responsibility to be good caretakers of God's creation. Economic injustice is not just about the American economy. It's not just a political issue. It's an issue of justice, which is one of the major themes of both the Old and New Testament. Health care for all of our citizens is not a political issue. This is a human issue. This is about our relationship with each other, loving our neighbors as we love ourselves. And our job as preachers and as the church is sometimes to address the issues of our nation, confronting kings and powers, rulers, religious leaders with the word of God for the day. Like Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham city jail, which should be read as regularly as the Gettysburg Address. Or John Lewis encouraging us to make good trouble. Or Jesus calling the Pharisees whitened sepulchres and snakes in the grass. Or like Amos. Finally, we come to the prophet of the morning, the prophet Amos, and the plumb line that he drops in the middle of life. Here are some selected verses from the prophet Amos. The words of Amos, who was among the shepherds, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of King Uzziah. Amos said, "I am no prophet or the son of a prophet, but I am a herdsman. I'm a dresser of sycamore trees. And the Lord took me from the flock, and the Lord said to me, 'Go, prophesy to the people of Israel. Now hear the word of the Lord.' And God said, 'The Lord roars from Zion, and utters his voice from Jerusalem. The lion roars, and who will not fear? The Lord has spoken, and who can but prophesy? This is what the Lord showed me, standing beside a wall built with a plumb line. And the Lord said to me, Amos, what do you see? I said, a plumb line. And the Lord said, see, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of the people of Israel. Ah, you that turn justice into wormwood and bring righteousness to the ground. I hate your festivals. I take no delight in your solemn assemblies. Even though you offer me your burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Take away the noise of your songs. I will not listen to their melody, but let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an everlasting stream. Amos began his ministry in 760 BC. He says he wasn't a preacher, he wasn't a PK, he was a herdsman. He was a dresser of sycamore trees. He was a common layperson, a dirt farmer, coming out of the hard life of the peasant community, the economically oppressed worker of the land who was cheated by wealthy and powerful people, one of the poor who got poorer while the rich got richer. There are a number of audiovisual special effects in Amos's prophecy, but his primary one is this simple image of a plumb line. A plumb line, easily constructed. All you need is a piece of twine and a fishing bob. It's a simple tool, but essential if you want a building to be in plumb, to be balanced, to be in line, to be in place. In seminary years ago, we did a comic review called Like It Is by Helen Cromer. And at the time, it was really quite radical. This was before Godspell, before Jesus Christ Superstar. And the character of Amos comes onto stage swinging on a rope with a huge plumb bob on the bottom. He looks more like Tarzan than he does Amos. But he sings the plumb line, the plumb line. It just came plummeting down, making a line as plumb lines do that is absolutely vertically true and setting askew as plumb lines do a vast amount of what everyone thought were vertically absolute parts of the town. Now, in all honesty, I suppose most of us would probably prefer a measure which allows for our foibles and our failures instead of a plumb line, something that gives room for our personal preferences and our preferred politics. We would probably like a plumb line that is not really so much of a line as it is a sort of a nice decorative border, probably in pink, which we can stitch around the edges of our lives to give them just a touch of religion, a dabble of spiritual dignity, but not really demanding anything of us. Instead of a contractor with a plumb line, well, we would probably prefer a more flexible God who is okay with our crookedness, a cuddly deity who would be comfortable with our crooked world. But instead of a teddy bear God, the first sound we hear is the roar of the lion God. The Lord roars from Mount Zion. His voice thunders from Jerusalem. When the lions roar, who can not be afraid? When the sovereign Lord speaks, who can keep from proclaiming his message? For Amos, the plumb line is the plumb line of justice and righteousness. The plumb line of justice for the least and the lost, the herdsmen and the dirt farmers, the oppressed and the poor. My guess is the folks in my churches who say they don't want politics mixed with religion have probably never read Amos or any of the prophets or even Jesus for that matter, because the line of justice for the poor and the oppressed, the widows and the orphans, the aliens and the outcasts is a consistent thread that runs through all of the Old and New Testament from beginning to end. And for Americans, that plumb line is really a part of our founding vision. Whenever I go to Washington, D.C., I think my favorite monument is the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. If you've been there, you know it sits sort of apart from the hustle and bustle of the mall on the other side of the reflection pool. Now we know a lot about Thomas Jefferson, his support of slavery, his imperfections, but he was able to give words to the vision for this nation. He was able to articulate a vision that was larger than the man himself. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now again, unfortunately, at the time when it was written, we know that it really did mean just men, and only white men for that. But on the opposite wall of the memorial is carved another quotation from Jefferson. Can the liberties of this nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are a gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for a nation when we reflect that God is just and that his justice will not sleep forever. At this point, he sounds a whole lot like Amos. I too tremble for my country while we struggle with issues of racism and injustice. I too tremble for my country when the plumb line is liberty and justice for all. And at that point, I always like to ask, what part of all don't we understand? Liberty and justice for all. Our granddaughter was born in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania on July 1st, first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. I always said any woman that was born on the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg was going to be a woman to contend with, and she is. We were in Gettysburg to celebrate her birthday, and of course, you can't walk those sacred grounds without knowing that you are on holy space, a place where the great battle was fought over whether or not this nation would be committed to the liberty and justice of all. It's also sobering to remember that on the very day, 4th of July, when the nation should have been celebrating the 7th anniversary of our independence, literally thousands were dying on the fields of Gettysburg to try to preserve that vision. There's another set of words carved in the memorial of another national hero. They reflect the dreams of the founders, the cause of Gettysburg, the hopes of the prophets. When Martin Luther King quoted the prophet Amos, "Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an everlasting stream." This God of Amos roars like a lion, and the first word is the word of righteousness and justice, but it is justice clothed in mercy. If the first major word is justice, the second major word is mercy. After warning of God's stark plumb line, the cry for justice on behalf of the poor and the oppressed, after the images of God as a roaring lion, Amos hears God's promise. I will raise up the booth of David that is fallen and repair its breaches and raise up its ruins. I will restore the fortunes of my people Israel, and they shall rebuild ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink wine. They shall make gardens and eat their fruit. It's the same message that we heard yesterday in Hosea. The first word is justice, but it is justice clothed in mercy. And in the end, God's justice becomes the pathway to the promise of redemption and of salvation. In fact, God's justice is mercy, because the plumb line is the line of radical love, calling us, convicting us, prodding us, moving us toward God's vision of the kingdom. In mercy, God calls us to be his people, to live in harmony with each other and with the world around us, life that is plumb, in line, in balance. The story is told of Oliver Cromwell, who was one day sitting for a portrait. He said to the painter, "Well, my good sir, do me justice." And the painter replied, "Sir, you don't need justice. What you need is mercy." And don't we all? Don't we all? After the word of justice, we find that the lion that roars is also the God who loves and redeems his people. On our last trip to England, we visited Lavenham in Suffolk. Some of you may have been there. Delightful medieval town, full of houses of old timber and plaster dating from the 1300s, all of them hopelessly out of plumb, all of them leaning one way or the other after 700 years of inhabitation. One house claims to be the house described in the poem. There was a crooked man who walked a crooked mile. He found a crooked sixpence upon a crooked stile. He bought a crooked cat who caught a crooked mouse, and they all lived together in their crooked little house. And when I read Amos, sometimes I look at that little man and his crooked little house and his crooked little cat and his crooked little mouse, and I wish Amos would just keep the plumb line in his pocket so that we could all live together in our crooked little house. But in my better moment, I know that I need to hear the word of Amos. Our nation and our world needs to hear the lion's roar, once again to hear the call for justice and for righteousness. And in my better moments, I know that we all need to measure our lives in the reality of God's plumb line if we are ever to experience God's redeeming mercy and grace. May our prayer be, O God of Amos, drop the plumb line along our lives. Measure us by the measure of your justice. Meet us with your incredible mercy until we live out the promise and the hope of liberty and justice for all of God's people. Until the day comes when justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harnish. Comments and questions? I would start off by just saying, it seems like most of us in our daily life, we either err on the side of justice or mercy, of being either too soft or too hard. Can you say a little bit more about that, kind of the balance?
That's a good question. I think the point of Amos is the plumb line, that is to keep balance, to keep things in plumb, to keep things in line, and to see both sides. Like I said yesterday, sometimes we tend to speak of the Bible saying that the Old Testament is about a God of justice and judgment, and the New Testament is about a God of grace. Well, that's true, but it's only a half-truth, because God's justice comes as an act of mercy. He's trying to tell us this is what it means to live a life that is plumb, and to constantly keep that balance between understanding the expectations and the demands of God's justice and understanding God's mercy and grace. That we really need both. And that in many ways, one leads to the other. Again, think of E. Stanley Jones. One of his best known books is simply called The Way. And he says, the Christian way is the way. It's the way of life. It's the way the universe works. It's the way the world works. And you either live in the way or outside the way. And that Jesus is saying, this is the way. So, there's always that balance between understanding the demands of the gospel and the reality that we all live by God's mercy and grace.
Oh, okay, sorry. This whole balance you reflected on in terms of the churches not wanting to have a political message. What is the history of that? I mean, I know that part of it came out of a fear of government control from some areas. So we have that on the balance. And is that where this fear came that makes us afraid to talk about some of these issues? I'm just kind of interested in how all that got started.
Yeah. Let's go back. I'm a firm believer in the separation of church and state. The founders all came from a place of established religion. They knew what it was for the government and the church to be melded together. The Queen of England is still the head of the church. That's where they came from. And, a God-given vision or whatever, when they came to form a new nation, they said, no, that's not what we want. We want a nation that is free from the control of the church and allowing for a church that is free from the control of the state. And it's both-sided. And I think that is still an important foundational principle for us today. That doesn't mean the two shouldn't talk to each other. And that is not to undermine the role of the church to speak the prophetic word to the nation. And I think that's where the prophets come in, directly addressing the nation. But that's where John the Baptist comes in. That's where Jesus comes in. That's where, at some points, where St. Paul comes in. He got in trouble in Ephesus because he was challenging the economic foundation. So especially in a democracy, I think we have the right and the privilege and the responsibility to speak what we believe to be God's word to the life of the nation. I think we're afraid of it, and we don't like to do it. They always tell you the two things you should never discuss are religion and politics. And today it's particularly difficult because, you get into conversations with people who disagree with you politically, and sometimes it can be pretty ugly, especially on Facebook, for heaven's sake. But somehow, to be able to continue to speak the word as we understand it, this is God's expectation. We're not asking for America to be a Christian nation. That was never the intent of the founders. But we are saying that the church, the body of Christ, has a word to speak to the nation. And we need to be willing to speak it. I know that answers your question. I can't tell you exactly where it all comes from, but now, we then going on, different parts of the church disagree about what God's message to the nation should be. And that's also part of our freedom of speech in this country and freedom of thought. But that's a struggle too.
I have a question for you.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
holding the mic, so
Yep.
I'll use it. With your Estonia, Soviet Union connections, how would you have preached this message there in those countries? How are those people being trained in those seminaries to address this very issue?
Well, there's no question about it. The coming out of the communist years and the Soviet years has been really difficult. But it really has given the church an opportunity to speak. I was in Estonia just after the fall of the wall for the first time. And at that time, I mean, this is 20 years ago now, but at that time, there was really quite a rush toward religion because people had been so bereft of it for so long. Now today, I think, particularly in Estonia, I know Estonia better than Russia, but it's almost like, okay, we won the battle. Now materialism is the god. Everybody wants to be rich. Everybody wants to be like Americans. And maybe that's the word that the church has to speak against. But, during the Soviet times, it was very difficult. There are literally martyrs of the church in Estonia and the church in Russia who gave their lives for the Methodist Church, the church in general, during those hard times. And now I think, who knows where Russia's headed, but still the call is to try to be faithful to God's call as the church and to apply that in their political world, in their place, in the same way we try to apply it to ours. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, hero of Second World War, trying to maintain the church's witness, the confessing movement over against the Soviet or the Nazi power, and ended up losing his life because of it. So we need to remember that and be mindful of it. Well, thank you very much. Tomorrow is Jonah, and everybody thinks they know the story of Jonah. I encourage you maybe to read it. You can do it in a quick jump, just a few minutes, and we'll try to take a fresh look at the book of Jonah. Thank you very much.
Dr. Harnish, thank you very much. We appreciate everyone's participation, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here tomorrow morning. And Dr. Harnish is available for questions and comments one-on-one as well, so don't hesitate to approach him at any time. So have a great day at Lakeside. Thank you.